It's actually the first, yeah, I think it's the first feature-length film shot on a mobile phone pre-iPhone. It was a Nokia N95, and the reason why I was keen on using that particular phone at that moment in time and felt the time was right was because I had a pretty crappy uh, entry-level Nokia phone that had the worst kind of video recording technology, which I used to make these super glitchy pixelated images. But that particular phone was the first one that came out with a Carl Zeiss lens, which all of a sudden made the imagery look legible and readable and in its own way beautiful. And the phone was not as big as the phones we have now. It could easily be held in the hand like this, which made it possible for me to do what I wanted to do, which was a lot of experimental handheld, for lack of better, let's call it video or cinematography, mobile video or cinematography. The project was funded as part of a visiting artist residency in Cornwall, UK at the University of Falmouth. Also got a little bit of funding from Tate Museum, or Tate Media, I guess is what they called it at the time, and also my university. So one of the things that I'll just get back to in terms of developing what I've been referring to as this narrative sensibility, among other things, is that early on in my life, when I was just going to college, a friend of mine worked at the international film series that had different international films playing every night on campus. And being a kind of like a bored undergraduate student with nothing better to do, he could get me in for free. So all of a sudden I was being exposed to all of these, what in the US, I don't know what you refer to it in Brazil, but we refer to them as foreign films. So not something that's not made in the US is called a foreign film. And the director, Adam Magoyan, once said, every film is a foreign film, and I concur with that. But for me, this was a way of defamiliarizing my relationship to cinematic language. The main reason being because, first of all, a lot of the films that were shown were classics and they were amazing works of art. Of course, we're talking about Bergman and Fellini and Antonioni, just to name a few. And watching those films required me to read the subtitles. So now what was happening in that very early formative stage was that the films that were having the most effect on me as an artist, in my thinking, in my way of operating, were films that I wasn't just watching or listening to, but that I was reading. And I was having to focus my attention on the text. And I was very self-aware of that. So the whole experience of trying to take all of these in at the same time, as you know, is not very easy. And I always, after that experience, of course, a lot of that's considered auteur cinema, right? And I had always wanted to, after that year or two of really taking in all those foreign films, I decided that I wanted to be not just a filmmaker, but in an odd kind of way. It's not exactly it, but I wanted to be a foreign filmmaker. I wanted to make films like those directors of foreign films, like those auteurs. I wanted to be an auteur, but not in kind of like an American way, like a Steven Soderbergh or other, or even Robert Altman kind of way. Literally like those films, and particularly, I have to admit, European films. So I went to film school instead. I applied and got accepted to UCLA Film School, which didn't turn out to be a great place to learn how to become an auteur film director. So I left it behind. I was like, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to focus on writing and drawing and other media that's actually more accessible and cheaper than trying to make my own films, especially since you're not going to get funding for a feature-length foreign film. But when I got the invitation to do the residency in Cornwall, UK, they said, what do you want to do? And do you need any technology? And I said, if you could just get me one of these N95 Nokia mobile phones that you can also buy an accessory, which is a very tiny little tripod, I would greatly appreciate it. And being the improv remix artist that I am, I had no pre-planned script or screenplay. I just went there and made the film. And as a consequence, I started learning about the region and making a film that I imagine is a kind of a remix of some of my favorite foreign films, like Bergman's Persona, Antonioni's trilogy, like Eclipse and La Ventura, um, and at the same time was really paying attention to the location. So in a way, not only do the two actresses uh, star in the film, but I really do think the landscape is one of the central figures. They used to say, like, you know, Cornwall has the most amazing light in the world, and in fact, the British post World War II abstract expressionists were very turned on to living and working in Cornwall because of the qualities of the light, which they traced back to the Sunday painters in the 19th century, who were kind of like fishermen who were doing their own version of experimental painting with, or in conversation with, the Cornish light. And I noticed that the N95 camera was actually capturing the light in a very different way, because it was just this new technology that, you know, in a way didn't know what to do with what I was at, you know, with what I was feeding it in terms of the source material. And so it became this meditation on, among other things, landscape, persona, and light, and it ended up, as you know, because it appeared and traveled all around Brazil, a kind of like an international sensation all of its own. And it's really, actually, it is one of my favorite works of all time. And I got to give credit to Chad Mossholder, my my sound collaborator on so many of my works, for making a brilliant soundtrack. The work would not be what it is without his beautiful soundtrack. And together, it all just kind of worked, and I was very pleased with its output.